At brother's job party, my gift said for the less ambitious son. Mom clapped when my brother announced his new job. She gave him a watch and gave me a notepad. 3 days later, I bought the company he joined. She never knew I was the one who interviewed him. The lights in the living room shimmered off silver balloons spelling out "Congrats, Tom," as Samantha quietly stepped inside, her heels barely making a sound on the polished floor. Laughter echoed. Her mother's voice rang out louder than all, proud, thrilled, glowing. "My brilliant boy," she said, arms wide open as Tom strutted into the spotlight like he'd just won a Nobel Prize. Samantha stood by the coat rack, unnoticed, watching the familiar family ritual unfold. It wasn't that she resented Tom. He was her brother. But what always stung, was the invisible line their mother drew between them. Tom was the chosen one. She was the side note. Then came the moment. Gift time. Everyone gathered around the table. Her mom lifted a small velvet box and handed it to Tom like it was a family crown. "For the man of the hour," she said, winking proudly. He opened it. A vintage gold watch. Applause broke out. Then, as if remembering Samantha's presence at the last minute, her mom turned to her. And for Samantha, she plucked a thin, flat box from the side table, one clearly wrapped in less care. A sticker on the top read, "For the less ambitious son." Laughter. Real, out-loud laughter from a few relatives. Samantha blinked but didn't flinch. She opened it. A plain notepad. No message. No effort. Just a blank stack of pages, as if that's all her life amounted to in her mother's eyes. She smiled politely, said thank you, and sat back down, folding the edges of her dress to hide her clenched fists. Outside, she was calm. Inside, something shifted. A quiet fire lit behind her eyes. They had no idea the kind of woman they had just dismissed. Not yet. But they would. Samantha sat alone in her car later that night, the notepad resting quietly on the passenger seat like a ghost from her past. The party lights still twinkled behind her in the rearview mirror, but her mind was miles away, back to childhood. Back to every time she had to earn what Tom was given. She was the kid who brought home straight A's, who read books instead of throwing tantrums, who helped clean the kitchen without being asked. Yet, she was the one told, "Don't be so sensitive," while Tom flooded the living room with chaos and still got ice cream. When she got a scholarship to Stanford, her mom said, "Well, at least it's not too far away." When Tom scraped by with community college, it was, "He's finding himself." At every birthday dinner, she was the one who brought the thoughtful gifts, baked the cake from scratch, and stayed late to clean up. And still, the spotlight never lingered on her. Even when she started her consulting firm from scratch, turning it into a powerhouse with Fortune 500 clients, her mom only ever introduced her as between things. The phrase lingered like a bruise. Between things. Like her hard-earned career didn't count because it wasn't a corporate desk job with a lanyard and a boss. She remembered last Christmas, Tom showed up late, forgot the gifts, and left early. He still got the best seat, the loudest cheer, and a plate made just for him. Samantha brought a $300 bottle of wine. Her mom poured it into a pitcher without a word. And now? Now Tom had landed a junior position at a mid-tier firm thanks to a friend's referral. A job he hadn't earned, hadn't worked for. Yet the entire family acted like he was entering the Fortune 100. That watch tonight? It wasn't just a watch. It was a crown. A symbol that he was still the chosen one. And that notepad, that stupid, cheap notepad, wasn't just a gag. It was her mother's version of truth. For the less ambitious son. Not even daughter. That label had cut through her like glass. She could almost hear the laughter again, replaying in her mind like a cruel loop. But sitting in her car, Samantha didn't cry. Not this time. Something settled in her chest, not bitterness, not sadness. Resolve. Cold. Quiet. Unshakable. She looked at that notepad again and whispered, "All right then. Let's write a new chapter." She knew the company Tom had joined. She knew its leadership. She knew its books. In fact, her firm had consulted for them once, briefly. And right now, they were looking for investors. Quiet ones. Strategic ones. And Samantha? She had money. She had power. She had patience. And now, she had a reason. Samantha returned to her sleek apartment late that night, the weight of the notepad still in her hands. She didn't even bother to change. Her heels clicked against the floor as she walked straight to her office, every step purposeful. The light above her desk flickered as if to greet her, casting a soft glow over the room. She placed the notepad down on the desk and opened it, her fingers tracing the empty page. She didn't need to write anything elaborate, just a single word, the most important one. Done. Her smile grew as she closed the notepad with a snap. The word didn't just mark an idea, it marked a decision. A promise to herself. The game had changed, and she was now playing by her own rules. 3 years ago, while the world watched Tom and everyone else play by the book, Samantha had quietly set up her own path. She didn't brag, she didn't show off, instead, she quietly invested in ventures that had seemed small, yet full of potential. Corporate ventures, unglamorous but powerful, places where she could leverage her growing influence in ways that went unnoticed, until now. One of those holdings was Crownridge Innovations, the company Tom had just joined. Samantha had watched it grow, helped it develop, and now, it was time to pull the trigger. She opened a file on her laptop, scrolling through the documents she had prepared. Crownridge was looking for a new regional director, someone with experience, someone with vision. Someone, she realized, who could lead, but also be controlled. And there it was, Tom's name, smack in the middle of the shortlist. Samantha's eyes narrowed. It was as if the universe had dropped this opportunity into her lap. Tom, with all his privilege and lack of real struggle, was climbing up, but not on his own merit. She could feel her pulse quicken, but she controlled it. No need to rush. This was a game of patience. Grabbing her phone, she called her COO, Marco. They'd worked together for years, and he understood her well. He'd followed her lead when she asked him to quietly help her build her influence in various sectors. The board knew her as the silent partner, the woman who made moves without ever being noticed. Until now. Marco, she said as soon as he picked up. We need to execute the buyout. Private, no public noise. I want Crownridge under my control by this time next week. There was a brief pause on the other end. Marco knew what this meant. It's done? He asked cautiously. Done, Samantha replied, her voice firm. Get the board vote on it. I need their full backing. Within hours, the deal was in motion. Samantha knew how to pull the strings from behind the scenes, and now she was using her connections, her influence, and her patience to pull the company into her orbit. She watched her phone as the news started circulating. The deal was closed within 48 hours. No one knew how it had happened so fast. Not even Tom. On the third day, everything was in place. Samantha sat in the back of a sleek black car, heading to Crownridge Innovations headquarters. The car's smooth ride mirrored her calm. Inside, she was a storm of ambition and calculated strategy, but on the outside, she remained unshakable. When she arrived at the office, HR greeted her with surprise. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. I'm the new owner of this company, she said, her voice calm but full of authority. And I would like to personally interview every manager. Especially the new regional director. The HR assistant hesitated, but only for a moment. Of course, Ms. Carter. Right away. As Samantha walked through the halls of Crownridge, a strange sense of power washed over her. She wasn't just walking through another corporate building, she was stepping into a place she owned. A place where Tom had no idea who had really pulled the strings. She entered the boardroom where the managers were gathered, the air thick with curiosity. They had no idea what was coming, but she did. And she was in control. One by one, she interviewed the top managers, but her eyes were fixed on the one who had unknowingly taken a seat at the top of her hit list, Tom. His smug smile when he saw her sitting at the table was enough to fuel her resolve. Well, Tom, she said, locking eyes with him. I must say, you've come a long way. Tom's smile faltered as he sat down across from her, unaware that his world was about to shift in ways he couldn't imagine. Tom stood outside the sleek, glass conference room, his hand trembling slightly as he adjusted his tie. He had never imagined he would be in this position, not at Crownridge, not for an interview, and certainly not under these circumstances. His mind raced, thoughts of his recent promotion flashing through his head. He thought it was his time to shine, to prove he was moving up in the world. But as he reached for the door, he paused. Something felt off. The atmosphere was different, too calm, too controlled. He opened the door, stepping inside. And then he saw her. Samantha. His sister. The woman he'd always believed to be the quieter, less driven one. The one who had always been content playing in the background while he took center stage. But now, she sat at the head of the table, her posture poised and commanding, a smile on her face, but her eyes sharp with focus. For a moment, his breath caught in his throat. His smile faltered. "What are you doing here?" he asked, trying to mask his surprise with casual bravado. Samantha's smile remained professional, cool, and collected. "I'm here to evaluate you, Tom." "You're up for evaluation." He couldn't hide his confusion. "Evaluate me? But I'm the new regional director. This is my role, I just started." She nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I'm aware. But in this company, we make sure the right people are in the right roles. Let's get started." He sat down, trying to steady his breathing, mentally trying to prepare himself. He had assumed this would be another standard interview, just a formality. But the air in the room felt heavy, different. This wasn't a typical corporate setup. There was something deeper at play. Samantha's voice broke the silence, sharp but composed. "Tell me about your experience with strategic management and how you plan to grow Crown Ridge in the coming months." Tom blinked, suddenly thrown off balance. This was not the question he expected. He stammered, trying to find his words. "Well, I've been working in a similar capacity for the last few years, and I..." Samantha interrupted him, her tone polite yet firm. "Can you provide specific examples of how you've successfully led teams through change, especially under pressure?" Tom's mind went blank. He had managed to wing it through every job interview he had ever had, relying on his charm and social skills to get by. But here, in front of his sister, the woman who had always been the quiet achiever, charm wasn't going to work. He fumbled for an answer, giving vague responses, hoping that something he said might make him seem competent. But he could feel the disapproval in her eyes, her gaze piercing through his attempts. Samantha continued, her questions getting sharper, more pointed. "You say you've led teams before. Can you give me one example where you were the driving force behind a major success?" Tom's mind raced. He tried to think back to any time he had truly led something important. But the truth was, he'd always been coasting, relying on others to make the big decisions while he took the credit. He had never truly led from the front. It was always about riding the wave. Samantha's questions kept coming, each one peeling back another layer of his facade. The more he spoke, the more he realized he wasn't prepared. He hadn't actually worked for this position, hadn't truly earned it. It had been handed to him, like so many things in his life. And now, sitting across from Samantha, he was starting to feel the weight of that realization. Finally, Samantha leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing slightly as she took in his responses. "I think that's enough for now, Tom," she said, her tone calm but firm. "We'll be in touch." Tom stood up, trying to mask his frustration with a grin. "Thanks for the opportunity," he said, but there was an awkward edge to his voice. He shook her hand, but the moment felt hollow. As he walked out of the conference room, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The doubt gnawed at him, but he pushed it aside, telling himself that everything was fine. Later that night, just as he was unwinding from the stress of the day, his phone buzzed. It was an email from HR. He opened it with a frown. Subject: Role Restructuring Notice. The email detailed that his position as regional director had been absorbed into a new structure. The company was restructuring, and his role was being eliminated. His position was being dissolved before his first week had even finished. Tom sat there in stunned silence. He reread the email, his hands shaking. "No," he muttered under his breath. "This can't be happening." But deep down, he knew it was. Samantha had played him, outsmarted him. And now, the life he thought he had built at Crown Ridge was crumbling. Tom could barely contain his fury. The news had shattered him, and now, standing in his apartment, the harsh glow of his desk lamp seemed to amplify the storm of emotion swirling inside him. How could Samantha do this? How could she ruin his new job, something he had finally worked so hard to get? He paced back and forth, clenching his fists. This wasn't supposed to happen. He had never imagined his sister, the quiet one who never made a fuss, could pull something like this. But he should have known. She'd always been the smart one, the driven one. And now, she was showing him just how much power she really had. He slammed his fist against the desk, frustration boiling over. His phone buzzed, breaking through his thoughts. It was Mom. "Tom. What happened?" What did you do to him, Samantha? He just started. Mom's frantic voice crackled through the speaker, her panic palpable. Samantha took a slow breath before answering. Her voice was calm, too calm. I made a business decision, Mom. Just like any ambitious professional would. There was a moment of silence on the other end, a pause that stretched out longer than Samantha expected. Then, Mom's voice broke through, this time laced with guilt and concern. But, Sam. He's my son. What did you expect me to do? He was so excited about this role. Samantha remained composed. She had expected this. Expected the guilt. Expected the disappointment. She had always been the one to bear the burden of the unspoken comparisons in their family. But not anymore. Not this time. She leaned back in her chair, staring out the window at the distant city lights, her words measured, deliberate. You raised a golden boy, Mom. But you ignored the one who built her own empire. There was a sharp intake of breath from Mom, the silence that followed was heavier than any words could be. Samantha let it linger. No more guilt. No more apologies. She had spent years living in Tom's shadow, always trying to prove that she was worthy of attention. She had worked tirelessly, but none of it was ever enough. When she made her first million, her success was brushed aside as just something nice. But now, things were different. She had built her empire on her own terms. She didn't need validation from anyone. Samantha took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. I'll let you go now, Mom. I have work to do. And with that, she ended the call. Not out of anger, but out of peace. Samantha felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of family expectations, the relentless comparisons, and the quiet resentment that had clouded her every achievement were gone. Free from the emotional baggage, she began to flourish. Her office, once a minimalist space that reflected her quiet professionalism, now felt like a reflection of her personal growth. She renovated the entire floor, sleek, modern, with a few personal touches, like the vintage desk she'd found at a local market, a symbol of her journey. She expanded her consulting firm into 3 new cities, each office buzzing with energy, each one a testament to her vision and hard work. But it wasn't all business. On weekends, Samantha found solace in nature. She hiked the quiet trails that wind through the mountains, and during those peaceful moments, she found herself reflecting on everything she had overcome. And there it was, her constant companion, the notepad. It had once been a symbol of her insignificance, but now it was something far more powerful. She carried it with her everywhere. It had transformed into her symbol of rebirth. Each page filled with thoughts, ideas, and goals she had set for herself, not for anyone else, but for the woman she had become. In addition to expanding her empire, she started mentoring young women in business. She found immense joy in guiding others, helping them rise above the barriers she had faced. It wasn't just about success, it was about empowering others to redefine their worth, just as she had done for herself. Then, the call came. A business magazine wanted to feature her story. The headline read, "The Silent CEO Who Reshaped the Tech World." She smiled, a small, satisfied smile, as she sipped her coffee on a quiet Sunday morning in her apartment, reading the article. There was no fanfare, no grand celebration. She didn't need that anymore. What mattered was the quiet recognition, the kind that she had always sought, not from others, but from herself. For the first time in her life, Samantha felt truly seen. Not by her mother, not by Tom, but by the woman who had built something meaningful from nothing. And that was enough. Months passed, and life for Samantha continued to unfold beautifully. The expansion of her business, her personal growth, and her newfound sense of peace had turned her into someone unrecognizable, not just to others, but to herself as well. She no longer needed validation from her family. She had finally become the woman she was meant to be. One day, as she sat at her desk reviewing contracts, a small envelope arrived, hand-delivered. She looked at the return address, it was from her mother. Her heart skipped a beat, but she quickly pushed the unease aside. After everything, this was the first time in years that she had heard from her mother. Opening the envelope carefully, Samantha pulled out a card. It was simple, elegant, and handwritten in her mother's familiar script. The words inside were direct, raw, and filled with emotion. I didn't realize how blind I was. You've become everything I hoped for, just not in the way I expected. I'm sorry. Samantha read the card twice. She could feel the weight of her mother's apology, but more than that, she felt a sense of relief. After years of trying to earn her mother's approval, the words were finally there, the acknowledgement she had longed for. It was a strange feeling. Not quite closure, but perhaps the start of it. She set the card down and reached for her pen, feeling an unexpected calm wash over her. She opened her notepad, the same notepad she had once seen as a symbol of her insignificance. Now, it felt like a powerful tool of her independence, a constant reminder of how far she had come. She wrote in it, slowly, carefully, each word purposeful. I forgave you. But that doesn't mean I'll return. She paused for a moment, allowing the words to settle into her heart. It wasn't bitterness that guided her decision, but peace. She had forgiven her mother, truly. But she had no intention of going back to the life that had kept her in the shadows. She was no longer the woman who had sought validation. She was her own person now, free and strong. Samantha closed the notepad, placed it back on her desk, and stood up. She walked over to the window, gazing out at the bustling city below. The world was full of noise, but in this moment, it felt quieter than ever before. And she realized that she was exactly where she had always meant to be. The power was hers. The journey was hers. And it had all led her to this peaceful, perfect moment. A small smile played on her lips as she turned away from the window, ready to continue her life on her terms.